and I do apologize for my Portuguese. I am the Executive Secretariat of CAS, Regional Coordinator of Southern Agricultural Council. I represent this gentleman that was not able to make it. So I'd like to thank you for the invitation of João Bosco, president of the Brazil Africa Institute, to be part of this event where we can debate among Brazilian leaderships and African leaderships about the important topics of global interest. I'd like to greet the authorities and friends that are here. For IICA, it's important to be part of this debate and including at this time discussions about the importance of sustainable and healthy food or agri-food. I'd like to say that events such as these gathers institutions and actors from several countries to discuss the advancements related to innovation, technology, trade, entrepreneurship, in addition to have business opportunities, cooperation between Brazil and Africa, and the construction of relationship networks. In this panel, we're going to talk about the strengthening the role of agri-food in trade in a sustainable development and food security, and also some opportunities and challenges to Latin America and Africa. To make this debate more dynamic, I'd like to call to the stage Dr. Marcus Shank, Senior Professor of Agribusiness at INSPER. Dr. Cristina Costa, Technical Coordinator of the IICA office in Brazil. Dr. Federico Turola, President of the PSP Hub, Infrastructure and Urbanism Think Tank, and Guillermo Valles, Ambassador of Oriental Republic of Uruguay in Brazil, and my friend. So before I pass the floor to the debaters, I'd like to make some considerations for this debate. The action of IICA, present in 34 countries, reinforces the importance and strength of this partnership between countries to face global challenges related to food security, water security, and climate and energy. In a global food security system having so many challenges, the world population has doubled since 1960 and the production of food has tripled. Although this result has been reached thanks to the increase of productivity, international trade has a crucial role ensuring access and availability of food at global level. In an interconnected world affected to climate change that made food systems more vulnerable, international trade has a key role in food security, balancing the balance, contributing to reduce hunger and diverse the food regimens. So between Africa and America, we see that both continents have natural resources and abundant biodiversity, having opportunities and responsibilities to the conservation and sustainability of those. In both regions, agriculture represents a vital area of the economy, jobs, and exports. International food trade in Latin America and Caribbean plays a key role in global food security, since that it is part of 18% of exports at global level of food products. Brazil is one of the key exports of food products, both in the Latin America and the Caribbean and the world, with a participation in 2022 of 39 percent. Those figures highlights their capacity to influence the dynamics of global food system. Brazil has knowledge and technology to interchange with Africa that has key inputs that Brazil needs, such as fertilizers. With regards to commercial flows between Latin America and Africa, these are concentrated in a few number of products and countries, and this scenario shows a window of opportunities and cooperation. So to take advantage on this opportunity, it's crucial to have a international trade environment with transparency and predictability. The promotion of conversations between Africa and Latin America is key to reinforce the role of food trade, food security, and sustainable development. Collaboration at the regional level and transfer of knowledge can speed up the advancements in sustainable agriculture, creating at the same time a more prosperous future for all people. Finally, the importance between Latin America and Africa, the importance that it has to IICA. Last year we had high discussions and a ministerial meeting between Africa and America about food systems. Our commitment is based on the agricultural sustainable development, food security. That's why we will continue supporting the facilitation of trade through experiences and knowledge exchange among our regions to enrich new collaboration strategies and help to face challenges in a more effective way. So, I'd like to invite Dr. Marcos Zhang, that is senior professor and a coordinator of agribusiness at INSPER and commentator in CNN Brazil, with contribution to global food systems. In his 35 years of career, always focused on agriculture in Brazil and abroad. Marcos, what actions could be taken to strengthen the role of Americas and Africa in food security in the region and in the world? Good morning. It's a pleasure to be part of this event. It's the second time I take part on this Brazil-Africa event. So this is one of the most important strategic issues to Brazil and South America. The proximity with Africa. I'm glad to see Guillermo, with whom I could live with several years in negotiations of Doha Roundtable at regional level and so forth. And we've been fighting for this. We met a long time ago, so it's great being here with Cristina and Frederico taking part in this panel. So first of all, South America. South America is the region with the biggest surplus, agricultural surplus on the planet. We beat North America by far, and we will still continue to grow because South America has a big growth potential, not only in productivity, agricultural productivity, which is the biggest Brazilian experience, tropicalization of agriculture, and what happened in Argentina and Uruguay, happening now in Paraguay, Bolivia, but also a revolution called the integration and the possibility. And the minister, Favaro, wants to take the integration of 20 to 60 million of hectares in this decade. So there's a great potential. And the third potential is in integrated systems. To do it the same area, soy, corn, and cotton cotton and ox, agriculture, livestock, energy, carbon, forests, all this is possible. And we are developing this more quickly in order. Actually, we have basically the same commodity. Some products that has more added value, such as fruits, some wine, and others. Things that happens in those countries. But anyway, South America is the biggest surplus in the world. And it will continue to be with diverse characteristics according to the region. Asia is the biggest continent in the present as demand. As offer, South America. As demand, Asia. Today, China and the southeast of Asia and east of Asia as well. The Middle East, which is a traditional market that we are
Brazilian cerrados or savannas. And so also even in some of the desert areas, we have the semi-arid areas in Brazil, which have similar climate. So we have a lot of connection and similarities between our countries and continents. When I was out of Brazil many years ago, and when I mentioned this, it was like I was totally crazy. I went to the International Food Policy Institute, and their ideas at the time were that it was Europe that was going to take their technology to Africa, or maybe African and Asian relations. But I always thought that the relationship between Africa and Brazil or South America would be the most relevant ones. So, and I would say that the strongest point of this relationship is the tropical technology, because I think the world took too long to find out how to produce in the tropics. Brazil started to explore agriculture in the tropics in the 70s. Brazil has been around for 500 years, but until the 70s, we hadn't discovered how to do that. Embrapa had to be formed. We need to have the research from the Brazilian universities to discover how to grow and produce in the Brazilian savannas. I think just the state of Mato Grosso produces more than the whole country of Argentina in terms of agriculture. So I think we should consider the Brazilian experience in Africa. Obviously, we have differences in the types of farmers and access to the market, access to technology. We know that the challenges are huge, but I think that what we are doing now is still very far from what we could do. And so I think we could have these integrated system to deal with commodities. I feel that sometimes people are a little afraid of talking about commodities. There's some type of discrimination, but commodities have never been a trend in the world more than they are today, especially after the pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war, the climate problems that are happening all around the world. And in Argentina, there was a disaster related to the climate. In Paraguay, also over the last 2 years, we've had terrible, huge climate or problems caused by climate. Inflation, very high inflation, as we hadn't seen in developed countries and rich countries for many years. Now all these geopolitical issues, with all of this together, just underscores for me the need to talk about the combination of food security, energy security, climate security. Those are the three main agendas in our world today. today, South America has a role, and I think the world needs to look to South America more than to other locations because of our experience here with food security, energy security. So I believe there is a very important cooperation agenda here. Also, related to climate, we are seen as the villain because we have illegal deforestation in Brazil. And I hope that the current government will be able to do more than the previous governments, but we won't be able to totally get rid of it. But when we talk about sustainable agricultural, low emission agriculture, we're talking about things that are opportunities and not threats for us. They are huge opportunities. For me, these climate issues, we are going to be hosting the COP30 conference. It will be a huge opportunity to put what we can do in the tropical zone on the table to show our possibilities. Obviously, we have to show results, especially the state of Pará, which is the state that has the largest rate of deforestation. But everything else is a huge opportunity. So I think this is a common agenda that we have with Africa. We have a technological agenda of the tropical agriculture projects that we've used, the also bioenergy, because the global energy transition won't be carried out by hydrogen or methane. It has to involve all of the different sources. There is no silver bullet. You need to have solar energy, wind energy, hydric energy, because the global energy matrix is still 85% from fossil fuels. So we'll have to go to 60%, then lower, 40%. So I believe that South America can be well positioned to find the solutions for this. Now, what are the problems or challenges in our relationship with Africa? I think they're the ones that we are familiar with. The protectionist policies. We're talking about trade here in this panel, but unfortunately what we see in the world right now is a return to protectionist policies. Even in name of climate change, countries are creating export substitution programs like the U.S. with very high subsidized, like IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, which is a program to attract industries, businesses to the U.S. to try to make up for what they lost in their the effects of the Chinese. So we are seeing protectionist policies in terms of the climate, taxation of the climate. Argentina, there's a disaster in what they do with agriculture. Unfortunately, I think they are making some very wrong decisions there in regards to agriculture in Argentina. Well, for Brazil, it's good, I guess. I think a lot of the expansion of our Brazilian agriculture has happened because we don't have these problems with public policies. But Argentina needs to recover in that sense, and have the right policies, taxing exports, bans, public inventory that's unlimited, subsidies for exports. None of these things are the solution. So we need to open new markets. We need to support vulnerable consumers, for sure, as we have done. But bans and taxation, higher taxation, is not the way to go. One more thing in terms of trade between Brazil and Africa. I think it needs to be expanded in both directions, but before that, we need to work on the technological cooperation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Marcos, in your excellent comment. So you talked about what is most important in guaranteeing the food security in this cooperation. So talking about this food or agricultural trade, considering all the investment and sustainable development, I would like to ask Dr. Cristina Costa, who is the technical coordinator of the IICA office in Brazil. She's a master in planning and sustainable development of agriculture. She has worked as a CNPq researcher over 27 years. She has vast experience in executing international development projects and supporting public policies for sustainable agriculture. So, Christina, my question is, how could regional cooperation on agri-food issues be strengthened to produce more food and improve the quality of that food? And also, what could be the opportunities for cooperation in terms of food security challenges? Thank you very much, Gabriel. It's a pleasure to participate in this very important discussion about the opportunities in Brazil and Africa and challenges in the agri-food sector. Before answering these questions, I would like to point out what has been mentioned in other panels here, which is the African context and the South American context and the similarities and many parallels that we can see, not only in terms of geographical similarities, climate similarities, the tropical zone that we are located in, but the positive synergies between the people in both our continents, which will make it easier to have this exchange of ideas and will help us to face this huge challenge of food security, energy security, and trying to answer these two questions that were posed. I start with two premises. To reach, there's no one-size-fits-all solution for food security or agri-food security. And secondly, the importance of international cooperation in creating these opportunities between the two regions. And to summarize this international cooperation, we could talk about three different fronts. First of all, in trade, which should advocate for free and fair and transparent trade. Technical cooperation, where we're going to obviously respecting our local each of the aspects, we are going to have this technical cooperation. Now, with each of these fronts, the technical or the trade cooperation, it's important to defend a multilateral trade that, as I said, will be free and transparent and fair, based on standards that are science-based. And the international food trade is very important to guarantee food security. We know that the environment where these transactions are carried out internationally for the agri-food sector, it's a very complex scenario because of taxation and subsidies, new and emerging countries that are coming into the market. So we need to try and promote and defend intra and inter-regional trade. It's very important to try and do that. And in that sense, the promotion of this interregional trade should focus on making the trade easier, improving infrastructure conditions and supply conditions, regulations, especially having a convergence in the regulations, adding value to the products. This is also another great opportunity for our regions. So this would be regarding the trade international trade and cooperation. Now, for technical cooperation, we have many different examples of opportunities in both regions. For example, in the countries along the Amazon region, we have different species of fish that have been adapted to tank conditions. So, for example, tambaqui and pacu. So, it's a very good source of protein, type of fish, a species of fish that is a good source of protein, which could be used to supplement protein needs in the diet in regions where there is a lack in protein sources. In terms of technical cooperation, another example would be from Chile, which has developed some vegetables in the Atacama Desert. So they have a genetic base of those species that are very resistant to the desert climate, very dry climate, which could also be used in regions like Namibia and Africa, for example. Another example could be, let me see here. Peru and Brazil is another example that we have in alternatives of biological control of a type of pest that attacks some crops, especially the corn crops. Also, we have the same type of pest in Sierra Leone, and so they have partnered with Brazil to try and find some alternatives to control this pest. Also, ICA has developed various technical cooperation initiatives. We've had 8 business rounds already for producers and businesses to strengthen the capacity of these rural producers or agricultural producers to be able to export their products. So now, in terms of scientific cooperation, which is the third example that I'd like to give, it would be important to take advantage of the expertise of research and innovation institutions that have developed alternatives for tropical conditions. Embrapa is one of these organizations that has been a reference for the development of agriculture in Brazil and is responsible for helping Brazil become one of the major food suppliers in the world. And so they have this legacy in the area of research for agriculture and tropical agriculture more specifically. They have many tools. They have the carbon footprint calculator, which allows you to estimate how many carbon emissions your agricultural production is emitting, and also allows, in this context of climate change, to use this as a very important tool. And it's all of their work is done in terms of promoting agricultural development in the tropical zone, whether in South America or in Africa. And to wrap up here, just as Marcos already mentioned, we can take advantage of technology for tropical agriculture to serve as an example and reference for countries in Africa, whether it's in the development of resistant species or in the proper management of the soil with different systems, the integration of crops and herds, developing species that will have a lower need for water, using a smarter type of irrigation system, because we are always thinking of agricultural that will be more sustainable, more inclusive, more nutrient rich for our communities. So to finish, my comments here, I go back to my introduction that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, but the solutions come from this set of alternatives. Brazil has a lot to learn from Africa. Africa has a lot to learn from Brazil as well. And Africa has its strategic importance, political importance. And so I want to point out that it's important to respect the particular aspects of each country. So those were my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cristina, for your contribution regarding the challenges of regional cooperation, ensuring food with quality for all, and the importance of a common action of the countries to make the regional commerce to happen. I now would like to call Frederico Turola, President of the PSP Hub, Infrastructure and Urbanism, with doctorship in regulation of markets, in peso economics, is expert in infrastructure, researcher of ITA, economist in global financial markets, professor at FGB University and other universities in Brazil and abroad. Federico, how can we get closer to the position of negotiations in the countries to face commercial challenges, including climate change? How can we guarantee global and food security in both continents? And which topics could be prioritized to join work on food security, sustainability, green infrastructure, trade, and integration? Floor is yours. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel, so I will continue talking about some topics that have been mentioned before by Marcos and Cristina, focusing mainly on the key element of the forum, which is trade, investment, and development, because Marcos said some important things, as well as Cristina, in terms of technological partnership that are very important. Most important places of cooperation between Brazil and Africa are not so much in terms of the trade that we have complementaries, but also all overlappings, as the African countries tend to have some overlaps with Brazil. But in a broader view, looking the big picture, the main opportunities are in terms of investments. If commerce is a transaction, agri-food commerce between Brazil and Africa, we have some overlays. That's what allows to work in an integrated way, producing from investments, technology transfer, and a better environment, so technological exchange and scientific exchange can be developed in a more effective way in business areas of several of the countries in between Africa and Brazil. So where are the opportunities that investment can bring to both realities? So first of all, complementarities in terms of development of production in specific climate areas that Brazil has developed, and in some cases, African countries have also have some important things done. Both Brazil and several other African countries face logistics challenges, and the ambassador will maybe mention challenges like Uruguay, and they have navigatable rivers such as Laguna dos Patos and Mirim. Brazil can export an amount of agri-food commodities more than Argentina. Brazil can have agri-food products with a production based on hinterland. So there are ways to take this production to the ports that are around Africa without good connections through the Cape of Good Hope, as we use Panama to reach Asia through the south of Africa. So we developed the logistics systems that is unique and big. Investments in the mineral area in Brazil is connected to agri-food sector, since the production of Matopiba uses an important area of the mine, railways, imports through Carajás. Brazil has a big capacity of shipping, development of logistics systems that are unique in big territories that are very similar to Africa, that can bring investment opportunities that are complementary and that will create opportunities for trade, technological exchange, integrated growth that are structural. Investments can bring opportunities and make them feasible. So we have great opportunities so that Brazil and Africa and African countries so those nations can develop in a complementary way, hands in hands, with a sustainable development. I'll be quick because the ambassador has a lot to say. Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you, Frederico, for your thoughts on how to potentialize the benefits of commercial international trade and the active participation in the opportunities and developments in food security. Now, going to the end of our debate, I'd like to call Dr. Guilherme Valles, my friend, ambassador of Uruguay in Brazil, with 48 years of experience working in several diplomatic positions in Latin America, Europe, Asia, and the UN. Ambassador of Uruguay in China, European Union, Belgium, and the UN in Geneva. Vice Minister of Foreign Relations, working for the UN as the Director of International Trade Division. So he'll talk about the actions. There are some political industries that have been adopted by this country. So in this context, in what sense the agricultural policies and commercial policies can be coordinated to reach food security? Thank you, Gabriel, and good morning to you all. I apologize for my bad Portuguese. It's a pleasure to meet friends such as Marcos and Jean, and I see Emil Shadi that is living in Geneva for so many years, the ambassador Aga, Frederick Aga from Nigeria. So, Gabriel, I have 5 topics very shortly. If I'd like to summarize, everything has already been said, by Marcos, Cristina, and Turola. But those 5 points, 2 of them will be fact-based. 2 reflections, and I will finish with some suggestions. First is related to food security. Situation in Africa and Latin America. We have to have a consensus of some things in Latin America. We are big exporters and so forth, but here in Latin America, we had 900 million people suffering from food security in a severe way. Out of those, let's say, we have 4 Brazilian countries in terms of people, population. 50% happened between Africa and Latin America, with some differences. Prevalence of food security in Africa was of 20% of its population. When Marcos talks about production, agricultural production in Africa, in survival conditions, 24% of severe food insecurity last year, according to FAO. But also here in Latin America, 12% of the population with food insecurity. It means that in a few days per year, some people didn't eat. The physical and economic access to food. So you have to consider that. It's a shameful condition within our population. Second, the food trade. How is the food trade within the regions in Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean and among regions? First thing you have to see has to do with the things that we share with Africa and the things that makes us different from Africa. If we look at the past 25 years, the agri-food production in Latin America and the Caribbean has increased 14 times, considering the value of exports. In Africa, only 4 times. So here we have an interesting thing to consider. We share many things with Africa, but also we have some differences. But from the trade standpoint, international trade standpoint, Africa imports food, and Latin America is an export of those food. But an interesting thing to see is that Africa exports food to Africa, while we export much more to Asia. So the exports of Africa reach their neighbors in Europe. This also shows another advancement of us reaching distant markets. We have this in China, India, and so forth. But it's interesting to think that many times we forget the imports from Africa. Where do they come from? They come from Europe. Our imports of agri-food come from our own region. Many times we say you don't have enough integration and commercial and trade flows among Latin American countries. They're very low, showing low levels of commercial integration, but in terms of agri-food, our imports are basically done with U.S., Canadian, and the Caribbean, and the rest is from Latin America. So we are integrated in terms of supply. I think this is important to consider. Now, when you look at the political aspect, or in the aspect of policies, Marcos was saying, or was mentioning the rise of protectionism. In addition to that, we have two important things to consider. First, the rise of industrial policies that can once again have a distortion in competitive advantages in the world. And at the same time, there's some private protectionism. And what do I mean by that? Some norms, voluntary norms, so to say, or the standards of trade imposed by distribution chains in the developed markets. If barriers are hard to negotiate or hard to identify, even more are the practices of technical standards imposed by the big distribution and import monopolies. That's the general overview. But even more dangerous for us is the rise of industrial policies in Latin America. Brings us two problems. So how can we answer or respond to those industrial policies, particularly from the developed countries in our societies? Once again, I see that we have to think about our industrial policies as opposed to agricultural policies. I see this happening in Brazil. When you talk about the new industrial policy, we are saying, hey, look at what they do in the agricultural system. We want to have the same fiscal situation. Enough. We have to understand that the new agriculture, especially in Brazil, is one that is related to industry of agriculture and services altogether. When you talk about commodities, these are not commodities. The services that are within this technological knowledge is just great. Now let me move to proposals and suggestions. And I want to pay homage to ICA. I got paid an air ticket to come to Sao Paulo, not because of that, but certainly because ICA has done a wonderful job and is still doing, thinking of tools that can help us to surpass this dichotomy between politics and agriculture and industry. Innovation is related to bioeconomy. Gabriel, you played a unique role that was enough discussed of bioeconomy as the new way of launching or relaunching Mercosur. This strategy of development can be a way of overcoming those ambiguous contradictions between industry and agriculture. We have to talk about this, and we have to talk about this with whom? We have to talk about this with Africa. We have to learn. We have a lot to learn from Africa. I'd like to see more African people here, to be honest. But we can have some instances of dialogue because Africa has a common project in Africa, the Africa Agenda 2053. So we have been talking about this from some time ago, with imperfections, situations where the goals are not met, but there is a strategic vision of Africa. So where is the strategic vision of Latin America for agri-food? Where is that? We don't have it. We have to learn from the efforts of Africa. In 2012, the second economic retraction in the world, Africa showed a great leadership.
Promoting the continental free trade area of Africa with various problems, obviously, but we have to follow it closely, participating in these discussions much more actively as Latin America, the Caribbean, and Africa. Comprehensive agricultural development policy from Africa. What do we know about this policy? Nothing. What do we know about how they are developing this comprehensive agricultural development agenda in Africa? I know that the Secretary for Africa from the Brazilian Foreign Ministry is here, but we have to have these organic dialogue platforms for our societies to face our challenges, to look a bit closer, Gabriel, to these issues. We had some other instances where we had a different look at ourselves as bioeconomies, to talk not only about exports in the traditional sense, but as Marcos Young said, bioenergies, biomaterials, all of these things that are new supply chains based on sustainable production that can help to transform this biomass and all it can offer us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Guillermo. Thank you for your very relevant comments about the potential of cooperation between our countries and having an inclusive trade concerning all the actors. And to finish this panel, I would like to thank each of our members here of the panel for their contributions about strengthening the role of agri-food trade in sustainable development, food security, and the opportunities and challenges for Latin America and Africa. I would like to congratulate the organization and thank you very much. Well, I'd like to ask you to stay on stage for the photo for 1 minute, please. Thank you very much. This was an excellent and rich discussion that we had regarding the role of agri-food trade. This morning we had very interesting debates. Now we're going to take a short break for lunch, and we will be back at 2 p.m. Please come back and be back on time. And before we leave, I would like to once again thank our sponsors, our diamond sponsors, Frexim Bank, African Development Bank Group, New Development Bank, Libyan Iron and Steel Company, and the Redland Group. Also, our platinum sponsors, Itaipu, Binacional, Fomplata, Development Bank, Fictor, Quintes. Pharma, SP Negócios, Reis Advocacia, and Cru Cosméticos.